Just a cold, some coughing.
Okay.
Well,
We've had a big change in the weather. We've gone from massive, summer, real hot temperatures to autumn, just like that. It's actually sweater wearing weather outside now.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll get the heat back again. How are things down in Colombia, Guido, weather-wise, temperature-wise?
We kind of entering in some type of winter, it's kind of dry yet. Here in my city, the weather is very nice. It's wonderful weather.
Wonderful weather. Okay. I like the cooler weather here. I prefer to put on a sweater than get really hot and sticky. How's the weather in Portland, Oregon, Ian?
Well, yesterday there was a little bit of rain, but the temperatures haven't been too cold. This morning it's just a little chilly, but the sun's out. Okay. The sky's fairly clear. For Portland, It's good weather.
Yeah, we got nice blue sky. I forget how to translate it. I know Fahrenheit and I know Celsius, but I can't translate them. I mean, we're like at 14 degrees. I know 21 degrees is 70 degrees Fahrenheit. So we're down probably 60, 55 degrees. It's strange. We moved to the metric when I was 18. And I know metric and imperial, but sometimes it's hard to try and translate one into the other. So how has the inner work been going? Ian?
Yeah, it's been going good. I listened to your new recording, The Morning Sitting, yesterday. It took me a while to get around to it, but tried that out. I think I'm going to try that pretty regularly going forward. And I've been continuing with sort of the 60 bones and also trying to work in the joint exercises. I'm noticing that my toes are much more distinct. Like I can actually, there's less and less confusion. No, that's that toe, that's that toe, that's that toe. And when I put my attention on them, they kind of stretch out, extend a little bit, or relax. I'm not sure which, but there's definitely like a expansion that happens. So I think that's a good summary.
Yeah, you mentioned in a message that we talked last week. I'm going to post that online today. I just edited it this morning, about how we talked about the moving down, right arm, right leg, left arm, and how circling around has an effect. And you mentioned in a message that you noticed that effect. Can you speak a bit more about that?
Yeah. Let me think about that a little bit. I noticed the going around, a few times, 5-10 minutes, something like that. I would notice something kind of shift in the solar plexus. It's hard to put into words exactly, but maybe a slight release of tension or something kind of shifting maybe into place. Kind of felt that way.
Well, I mean, William Nyland did say that helps to prepare us to receive a certain kind of higher impressions. So perhaps, and he kind of implied, he didn't quite say, but he kind of implied that it helps to bring our feeling center more together and not be as dispersed. That was implied. It wasn't stated specifically, but that's one of the things that I read in it. So maybe you're becoming aware of that, just bringing it into a greater coherence, a greater sense of unity in the solar plexus area. I'm not sure. I just thought your comment was interesting, how you, by doing it, you notice something. People who are new to the work, who are new to inner work, will not notice these things. They'll be going, what? Huh? but you've been doing inner work, starting with the Buddhist meditations and going on a lot of long retreats and stuff like that in your past. So you're not a newcomer.
I have about 10 years of somatic work, like some body-based meditation.
Yeah.
I've been working in a tradition that focuses on that at the introductory level. So I'm very used to coming back into my body, feeling what's there.
Yeah.
And so when things start shifting, I'm like, oh, I noticed that.
Yeah. That's good. Guido, any comments? Have you been able to do the inner work?
Doesn't seem to perceive some changes.
Yeah.
Like my spirit since last month is changed.
Yeah.
I'm feeling very excited, very emotional. That's the same day the doctor told me about that he can operate me. My feeling came it explodes, like a volcano in a very emotional way. The doctor said this come.
Oops, Guido, he's frozen.
Down,
Yeah. I'll just mention. I'll just mention for those who are listening, Guido had tongue cancer, had part of his tongue taken out over a year ago, and then it returned. And the cancer is sort of this hard knot right on his artery. Or actually, I think it's this artery. And he was just told on Monday that the surgeon is willing to operate. There's a big problem when you have a cancer sitting right on top of the artery in terms of bleeding. So he's on pretty high doses of morphine and things like that for pain control. But, I'm just curious to see if you've been doing inner work or you've just really been focusing more on your health and are you doing self-sensing?
Yes, I'm doing the 60-bone exercise. I like it very much. I had to check it. I had to check out the other exercises. Doesn't seem to be changing. To be a big change, and but slowly I can more. I say it's like addiction. The inner work does that, and the problem is for myself, how often I can do that. How often I can try harder and harder and harder, and that's a big task, I have to accomplish. I'm coming more into the work.
Coming more into the work, yeah. Okay, let's begin by doing an inner exercise. And I just posted this inner exercise online this week on my YouTube channel, torontohypnotherapist.com. I should try and make it available, I will make it available as an MP3 as well, so you can download it onto your phone. I'll probably be doing that this week. But it's always good to begin inner exercises just with a general relaxation. To begin in a very relaxed pose. So just kind of breathe in. And as you breathe out, just imagine a wave of relaxation going from your head down to your feet. And then take another deep breath from your abdomen. A nice deep diaphragmatic breath, so your diaphragm goes all the way down. And then as you breathe out again, relax from your head down to your feet. And then take another deep breath in, and as you breathe out, relax again. And then try to pay a little bit of attention to your body and notice if there's any place where there is some tension. And just breathe in and then relax that part as you breathe out. And it's always good to affirm why we are doing inner work. So silently in your minds, just repeat along with me, I do this work for myself. I do this work for humanity. I do this work for the earth herself. And I should just mention an aside, as we work on ourselves, even though we are collecting these higher energies, we're allowing something to settle within us, as our being changes, we affect people around us. And as our being changes, we also affect nature as well. So just again, become aware of your body, aware of your breath, aware of your breathing, and just take some nice breaths and become aware of the journey of the breath inwards through your nose, past your nasal cavity, back of mouth, throat, down into your lungs and back out again. And then we have the special quality called attention. And this is a quality that is wielded by our head brain, by our mind. And so perhaps we can bring our attention to our right shoulder, our right upper arm, our right elbow and the bend inside behind our right elbow, our right lower arm, our right wrist, the palm of our right hand, our right thumb, index finger, middle finger, third finger, baby finger, the top of our right hand, and moving back up our right arm, our right wrist, lower arm, elbow, upper arm, all the way up again to our right shoulder. And then become aware of our entire right arm at once, aware of your whole right arm. And while remaining aware of your right arm, bring a part of your attention, divide it, and bring a part to your right hip, your right upper leg, your right knee and the bend behind your knee, your right lower leg, your right heel, the bottom of your right foot, your right big toe, second toe, third toe, fourth toe, fifth toe, the top of your right foot, and then moving back up your right ankle, lower leg, knee, upper leg to your right hip. And then become aware of your whole right leg, aware of both your right arm and your right leg together at the same time. And while remaining aware of your right arm and leg, divide a part of your attention to your left hip, your left upper leg, your left knee and the bend behind your knee, the left lower leg, the left ankle, your left heel, the bottom of your left foot, your left baby toe, fourth toe, middle toe, second toe, big toe, the top of your left foot, and then moving back up your left leg, your left ankle, lower leg, knee, upper leg to your hip, and become aware of the sensation of your whole left leg, while also keeping a part of your attention on the sensation of your right arm and right leg, becoming aware of all three of these limbs, while you divide another part of your attention and bring it to your left shoulder, your left upper arm, your left elbow and the bend behind your left elbow, your left lower arm, your left wrist, your left palm, your left baby finger, fourth finger, middle finger, index finger, thumb, the top of your left hand, and moving back up your left arm, your left wrist, lower arm, elbow, upper arm, back up to the shoulder. And become aware of the whole of your left arm, while also aware of your left leg, and right arm. Aware of all four limbs at once. Your right arm, right leg, left arm. And let's just change it up slightly, and let's just circle our awareness around. Our right arm, our right leg, our left leg, our left arm, our right arm, our right leg, our left arm, our right arm, our right leg, our left leg, and ending again with our left arm, just to make it a little bit more understandable what I was talking about with Ian in terms of circling around these limbs. But now try to become aware of all 4 limbs at once, sensing them at once while again dividing a part of your attention. Now we have 5 sacral vertebrae just below our pelvic bone and our very, very lower back. We've got 5 lumbar vertebrae in our lower back, 12 thoracic vertebrae in our middle and upper back, and 7 cervical vertebrae in our upper back, or in our neck. So try to sense each one of these individually, starting with sacral 5 at the very bottom of our tailbone. Then moving up to sacral 4, 3, 2, 1, and then moving into the vertebrae in our lower back, the lumbar vertebrae, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and then moving into the thoracic vertebrae in our middle back, 12, 11, 10, 9, 8, and then moving into the thoracic vertebrae in our upper back, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and then moving up to the sensation of our cervical vertebrae in our neck, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and sensing our entire spine while also remaining aware of all 4 limbs, aware of your right arm, right leg, left arm, and your entire spine, all at the same time. And then hold on to this awareness and allow yourself to become aware of the sensation of the occipital bone in the back of your skull, the temporal bones at the side of your skull, the parietal bone at the top of your skull, and moving down into the frontal bone just behind your forehead, aware of all 4 limbs, your spine and skull. And then move your awareness down into your eye sockets, down into the nasal passage, the roof of your mouth, the inside of your mouth, where your lips and teeth meet, down into your tongue, resting in the bottom of your mouth, down to your jaw and the flesh below your tongue, and then move into your throat, down your throat to your chest, to your abdomen, to your solar plexus, your abdomen, your pelvis, right down to your reproductive organs. Trying to sense all of these points at once, your 4 limbs, your spine, your skull, down through your mouth, your throat, down your chest, solar plexus, abdomen, pelvis, to your reproductive organs. Trying to get this sensation of self, developing the sensation of your physical awareness. And then become aware of the physical dimension, the sensory dimension involved in breathing. Become aware of the movement of your diaphragm, abdomen, the muscles between your ribs. Become aware of the sensation of air as it flows in and out. And then try to become aware of something other than sensation as you breathe in. Become aware of something that perhaps we can use the word feeling, as the air flows from your lungs down to your solar plexus. Become aware of something arising in your solar plexus, a different quality than sensation. And as you breathe in, perhaps imagine breathing in the active elements of the air to yourself and feeling this something flowing down into your solar plexus. And then as you breathe out, imagine breathing out a gray, foggy waste as you sense that part of this something, this feeling that arises in your solar plexus flows down to your reproductive organs. Breathing in, just aware of this something that flows down to your solar plexus and arises in your solar plexus. And as you breathe out the gray, foggy waste, imagine that part of this flows down to your reproductive organs. Breathing in, imagining breathing in the active elements contained within the air and feeling something arising in your solar plexus, a feeling And as you breathe out, imagine that part of this something flows down to your reproductive organs as you exhale a gray, foggy waste. Now, as you breathe in, think the word I, say it silently in your mind, and as you breathe out, silently repeat the word am. So breathing in the word I silently as you feel this something arise in your solar plexus, and then breathe out the word am as it flows down to your reproductive organs. Breathing in the word I, breathing out the word am, and as you breathe out, just imagine exhaling a gray, foggy waste. Use the imaginative faculty of your head brain to represent to yourself that you are breathing in active elements as you say I, and that you are breathing out a gray, foggy waste as you say am. And then as you say I and breathe in, make sure you sense your whole body, all four limbs, spine, skull, head, throat, chest, solar plexus, abdomen, pelvis, reproductive organs, sensing your whole body. And as you breathe out, remain aware of the sensation of yourself. And as you breathe in, I become aware of something flowing into your solar plexus, a feeling, something that arises there. And as you breathe out, imagine that part of what, or sense or feel that part of what arises there flows down to your reproductive organs. And then let's just quietly do this for about a minute or so, breathing in I, trying to be as aware of as much of what I said as possible, and then breathing out the word am. Let's just do this now for about a minute. And then let's just allow our attention to rest, and let's move into the 60 bone exercise, so that those who are watching, who haven't watched some of the earlier videos, or who haven't gone on to the playlist that I've created at Toronto Hypnotherapist, the YouTube channel, which is called Exercises in the Gurdjieff Tradition, can understand what we're talking about. And I'm going to bring up the little video that I have. Hopefully we can see this or not. I'm not sure if we can. Can we all see this?
Yes, it's showing up.
Okay, whoops. Let me get the volume up. So this is the prayer. And it involves our fingers and toes, right hand, left leg, left hand.
Wholly affirming, wholly denying, wholly reconciling. Transubstantiate in me for my being. This is the 60 bone exercise. Become aware of all 3 bones in each finger and toe, and repeat a line from the wholly affirming prayer in the following sequence.
Wholly affirming, wholly denying, wholly reconciling, transubstantiate in me for my being, wholly affirming, wholly denying, wholly reconciling, transubstantiate in me for my being, wholly affirming, wholly denying, wholly reconciling, transubstantiate in me for my being, wholly affirming, wholly denying, wholly reconciling, transubstantiate in me for my being, wholly affirming, wholly denying, wholly reconciling, transubstantiate in me for my being, wholly affirming, wholly denying, wholly reconciling, transubstantiate in me for my being, wholly affirming, wholly denying, wholly reconciling, transubstantiate in me for my being, wholly affirming, wholly denying, wholly reconciling, transubstantiate in me for my being, wholly affirming, wholly denying, wholly reconciling, transubstantiate in me for my being, wholly affirming, wholly denying, wholly reconciling, transubstantiate in me for my being, wholly affirming, wholly denying, wholly reconciling, transubstantiate in me for my being, wholly affirming, wholly denying, wholly reconciling, transubstantiate in me for my being, to stop it there. The exercise that I just showed you goes around 3 times. And according to Mr. Gurdjieff, we should do everything 3 times. But let's become aware of the fact that as the earth is surrounded by an atmosphere, we too are surrounded by an atmosphere, perhaps a meter, meter and a half, 4 to roughly 5 feet. And do your best to become aware of the boundary of your atmosphere, the limit of your atmosphere, and keep your atmosphere tranquil and calm. And we can disperse our atmosphere through our thoughts and associations, through our feelings, through our sensations. But right now, do your best to keep it calm and collected. This is the exercise Mr. Gurdjieff called the collected state. Keep your atmosphere tranquil, still, serene, quiet around you. And all of the work, the inner work we've done this morning so far, partly contained in the atmosphere. So in a moment, I'm going to count from 1 to 3. And when I get to 3, just suck it in. Bring these active elements that we've created through this inner work that's in our atmosphere into ourself. And then as we breathe out, imagine that something remains, that some of these higher particles that we've created remains within ourselves and helps to create our inner being. 1, 2, 3. And then just breathe out and breathe normally. And it's always good to end inner exercises with an affirmation as well. And so can you repeat silently in your mind, may results from this exercise be transubstantiated in me for my being. And the thing about inner exercises, for a long time, I've always claimed that the right inner exercises and the wrong philosophy is better than the right philosophy and the wrong inner exercises. We can read the right philosophy, I believe, by reading In Search of the Miraculous and Mr. Gurdjieff's books. We can develop this knowledge, this understanding of how to transform ourselves and where we fit into the universe. But unless we practice inner exercises on a regular basis, daily, we will not really grow our inner being. I was just doing the 60-point or the 60 bone exercise, not the 60-point. That's J.G. Bennett, moving down the body on one side and up the body on the other. But the 60 bone exercise yesterday, and I try to do inner work, as often as I can remember when I can do it throughout the day. I like to start my day. I wake up. I really bring myself into the sensation of my body, the sensation of my breath. I really do everything I can to be as present in my body before I even get out of bed. And then, I get out of bed, I go to the toilet, and I take the dog out for a walk. And one of my favorite places to do inner work is when I'm taking the dog out for a walk. For myself, rather than do a lot of the sources of divine rejoicings and moving through the bones, I like to silence the thoughts in my mind and just become aware of what I can see, hear, smell, taste, the sensation of my body. And I try to breathe in and become joyful and to rejoice. But that's my own inner work. I've been doing this for a long time, for just try to get to the level of where you are just able to do it, but not able to do it. There's this line that always grows, so that if you get confident and you can do an exercise very easily, you push your limit just ever so slightly. And by doing this, this is how we grow our being. So through the inner work, through breathing, through doing all of these things. And I should also say that the exercise that we did, the first part, the going down the arms and the self-sensing, I learned that from a recording of by George Adi, who was one of Mr. Gurdjieff's students. Also, the breathing, that was part of the exercise, but Mr. Gurdjieff also talked about that in one of the talks that he gave. And he said, doing the breathing exercise, getting the body into the relaxed state, sensing the body, and becoming aware of the breath and breathing down into our solar plexus and going through that. Just doing that exercise, he said, is equivalent to a month's worth of regular inner work, because this is an alchemical process. The higher blends with the lower to meet in the middle. And if you've read chapter 9 of In Search of the Miraculous, Mr. Gurdjieff goes through the alchemical process of transformation and change. And we have to have a little bit of a higher substance within ourselves in order to interact with the lower substance to cause that alchemical growth, that movement upwards. And through doing this breathing, and by breathing consciously, we are actually seeding some of these higher particles inside ourselves that we will need for inner work. And this is why I've titled that recording that I just put up online last week, The Morning Sitting Exercise, because I think it's something that should be done in the morning so that we accumulate these higher particles, these higher molecules inside of ourselves that can really help to boost our ability to work throughout the day. Now, this is sort of, the inner exercise part. But I want to just read something to begin the psychological part. To begin, this work has two components. One part of it is trying to step up into as high a state as possible. And the level above, Mr. Gurdjieff said there's 4 levels of consciousness: sleep, waking sleep, or the delusional state that we normally live in; personal consciousness, which to me is the mindful state and mindful awareness, but with all 3 brains; and then objective consciousness, which is the awakened state. Now, to move up from the delusional state of waking sleep that most of us live up into the mindful state, these exercises all involve us becoming mindful, becoming aware, creating this alchemical process that allows us to step up. But the reason we are unable to do that, to maintain that state on a regular basis, is because we are broken and we are leaking energy at the lower levels. And it's like our atmosphere gets pulled this way and that way. And rather than being able to settle within us and to create our inner body, it's like what we identify with, our atmosphere goes towards. And all sorts of problems within ourselves. So part of the system also involves a profound psychological approach to understanding where we are broken, to fixing ourselves at the lower level. And so I want to bring up something that Frtiz Peters wrote. There's a book called My Journey with a Mystic, which is really composed of 2 books. It started out as Boyhood with Gurdjieff, and Frtiz Peters was approximately 11 years old when he was kind of dumped at the Prieuré in France and left under the control of Mr. Gurdjieff for a long time as a young boy, with his older brother as well, the 2 of them, and they hung out with the kids. And so he wrote a memoir sort of 30 years later about his boyhood with Gurdjieff, but he also wrote another book. I forget the name of the other book, but it was his reflections on the teachings. And they've been combined together into a book called My Journey with a Mystic. And this comes from the second part, him reflecting back on the teachings. And there is such wisdom, not just in what he's saying in this section, talking about what Mr. Gurdjieff talked about, but there's a real profound wisdom in terms of understanding who we are. Just briefly, it's like we are a stick. And Mr. Gurdjieff said every stick always has 2 ends. And it's like one side of the stick has gotten stuck. And that's who we are, the stuck. And we want to free it, not to go to the other side, but we want freedom. People have asked, how do we free ourselves from laws? Mr. Gurdjieff says that at the mechanical level, we are subject to 48 laws. At the mindful level, the level of personal consciousness, the planetary level, we are subject to 24 laws. How do we free ourselves from the laws of the lower level? And one of them is figuring out those stuck points where we are and beginning to develop the opposite quality. So, astrology had been a really genuine science. At one time, and as a part of a general discussion on the deterioration of knowledge and science in the modern world, Gurdjieff brought up the subject of astrology. He claimed that many centuries ago, it had been a really genuine science and very different from the present-day conception of astrology. As an example of the way in which it had been civilized and misinterpreted, he said that the astrological signs were originally invented to synthesize the particular characteristics against which a given individual would have to fight or to struggle in the course of life on Earth. He said that an individual born under the sign and influence of Aries, the ram, should properly remember that the ram was a symbol of the characteristics of his nature against which he should struggle in order to achieve harmony and balance within himself. Scorpio, in this interpretation, the female kills the male when mating has been accomplished, could generally be interpreted as a killing sign. Although he did not mean killing in a physical sense, he went on to point out that Pisces and Gemini were the two obvious dual signs, but that they represented two different kinds of duality. In Pisces, it is warring duality, two fishes tied together, as they are sometimes depicted in old gravings and drawings, but struggling to break the bond between themselves. In other words, Pisceans have to struggle against a self-divisive tendency in their own natures. Gemini, on the contrary, represented a merging duality, and the struggle was against ingrowingness and towards separation. Sagittarius has to struggle against destructiveness, the arrow aimed against the world, and so on. The straightforward, simple method being to find out what your sign symbolized in your mind and relate it to your natural characteristics. Gurdjieff did not discuss all the signs in detail, but suggested that once one could discover for oneself what the sign symbolized or represented in the way of characteristics or compulsions in oneself, then one would have to remind oneself that such a synthesis represented those elements against which one would have to fight throughout life. But what might be called the built-in obstacles in one's own nature that were part of the key to self-perfection or growth, the necessary obstacles standing in the path to self-development. He added that, as was usual in all great ancient sciences, the lesson was never clearly stated, but could only be learned with effort, and that a great part of the problem in astrology was the individual's particular interpretation of the meaning of his sign for himself. Going back to Aries as a convenient example, he said that it was not only that persons born under this sign would have to struggle against their tendency to ram or batter in various circumstances and situations, but it would also depend upon their interpretation of ramming and their personal analysis and understanding of the ways in which this compulsive characteristic was manifested. The sign, in other words, was a key, an indication for all persons born under it. But since each person differed individually, it would be necessary for them to find out for themselves in what particular ways the sign manifested in their individuality. He warned that in particular, individual search and analysis of such characteristics, a clue usually could be found if one was able to observe objectively the characteristics within oneself to which one is inordinately attached. He said that while it is very hard to observe one's personal prejudices and pleasing characteristics with real objectivity, it was nevertheless necessary to do so in order to evaluate oneself correctly. In this, other people could be useful, as through them it was possible to observe the effects upon them of one's own recurring individual manifestations. One way to discover those things within ourselves to which we are attached, which we like, and of which we are proud, although perhaps quite unconsciously, is the frequency of their repetition in outward manifestations, in dealings with others. Such recurrent manifestations could be the first clue to our vanities, which in turn should be interpreted in relation to the characteristics of our astrological sign. In an attempt to give an easily comprehensible hypothetical example, and a very obvious one, he said that if a given individual should observe in his dealings with other people, he manifested a certain persistent, recurring insistence on having his own way, and that such a person turned out to be someone who was born under the sign of Aries, the implication is fairly obvious. Learn how, consciously, not to insist. If a Piscean was also insisting in this sense, the insistence might be interpreted as one-sided insistence. And it might be necessary to learn consciously to insist with the other half of one's nature. If a person born under the sign of Aries can learn not to insist in his dealings with other people, assuming that he has found he does so, he will at least have learned the possibility of not being insistent in his own self-struggles towards growth or development. Any recurring manifestation, any unconscious habit is, of necessity, a form of blindness, in that the repetitive manifestations, by its very operation, prevents conscious activity. In relating this rather general conversation to Gurdjieff's work or his method, I could only conclude personally that it is a fairly clear example of his teaching. Fundamentally, the discussion seemed to me to emphasize the need to produce constant struggle within oneself, which generally was the basis of his method. Anything to keep the pot boiling, anything, including astrology. The simplest guidepost that he gave in this discussion of astrology and the signs of the zodiac was to watch for those things in oneself which one loves, whether they were physical, emotional, or mental manifestations, compulsions, habits, or characteristics. He gave a choice of terms. If you loved your hands as a physical feature, this was a clue of a kind, something to do with the use or function of your hands. If you loved or cherished your propensity for eloquence, this was another clue. If you loved or were proud of the fact that you were always honest, another clue, and so on. Not much in the way of answers, but as he admonished repeatedly, there are no answers except the ones that one finds for oneself. Frtiz Peters, My Journey with a Mystic. And I should say I have a PDF copy that's downloadable, but it's on my website, torontogurdjieff.com. That's all one word, torontogurdjieff.com. And there's a page, I forget what I call it, resource. And this book is available. You can easily download it. Now I'm a Libran. Balance. I remember how proud I was when I was in my early 20s and two close friends of mine had this real blow up and they became mortal enemies. And they told their friends, you can be friends with me or you can be friends with him. And they both said that. And so a group of people slowly, well, I like you or I like you. And I refused to do that. And they tolerated me. I had this ability to bring people together. I had this, the balance, the Libran quality. I was always seeking peace, always trying to bring harmony, always trying not to be judgmental about situations and people. And so I started to create friction in my life with people. When I first came back to Canada, I couldn't get a job. I was really broken at that point. This is going back to 2002. I ended up getting a job as a security guard for a few years. And at one point, I went to war against one of my supervisors. And people would come to me and say, he did this to me, and then I would confront him. And I did this as a deliberate, conscious act. It felt so uncomfortable inside me. I was the peacemaker. I was the one who always brought people together. And here I was, trying to create friction, trying to create problems. What I was really trying to do was to unfree this. So I had that flexibility. The Myers-Briggs personality test. It's just recently been in the news a lot because a lady wrote a book about it, and it's coming up to an anniversary of when it was developed. It's these binary characteristics, so introverted, extroverted, perceiving versus judgmental, intuitive versus thinking. I forget that, and the perceiving versus judging, intuitive versus feeling, introvert versus extrovert. I kind of missing one. I first did this test when I was taking a course, a graduate course in the Department of Religion. Actually, it was at the University of Ottawa, given by a professor by the name of Kazmierski, and it was in his office. It was a small group. There were only 6 of us. And there was a nun who lived at a convent at the time in Ottawa, and she brought this whole stack of Myers-Briggs photocopied tests for us. And then I went and photocopied my test, and I gave it out to all sorts of people. I thought it was a wonderful tool. I was really, really far in the extroversion scale. I was really, very much a perceiver rather than a judger. And I've really worked to become an extrovert. I've really worked to learn how to communicate with people. I spoke a little bit about it last meeting, where I talked about learning how to externally consider how to perceive people. So these binary switches, these places where we are trapped, and we can use our astrology, or we can use not just the Myers-Briggs, but the Enneagram, which isn't really the Enneagram of personality. It's more a law of 3, but there's applicable understanding to find what you are and to struggle against it so that you can free yourself up from those mechanical manifestations within yourself. So to use astrology, to use the Myers-Briggs, to use personality tests, not to say who we are. Well, I'm this, I'm an INFP or whatever it is, but to realize that these binaries, these different things can give us something to struggle against. So whatever you learn about yourself, whatever people tell you about yourself, whatever are really ingrained, deeply set habits within yourself, you've got to begin to learn to struggle against it. And Dr. Sternoval, one of Mr. Gurdjieff's students who had been there, I believe he was one of the 6 people, along with Uspensky in St. Petersburg and Anna Butowski and 3 others in that original group. When Mr. Gurdjieff found Louise Gebhardt Marsh, who was the translator of Tales into German, he told her that Mr. Gurdjieff is trying to do something. He's trying to take one person of, a person of one astrological sign and change them into another. In other words, to fundamentally free ourselves, to find those places where we are stuck. And as Frtiz Peters talked about, those things that we are inordinately proud about ourselves. I was really proud that I was a peacemaker, that I brought people together, that I would take what one person said, interpret it, and tell it to another person in a way they could understand it, and take what they said, interpret it, and give it back to the first person, and slowly bring people together, as a form of mediation. It was something I did naturally. And I wouldn't judge people. People, a lot of other people, they would say I did this, and I wouldn't judge them for having done that. I would say, well, you did that. And, in the last few years, a number of people have said, boy, you're so judgmental. And inside I'm going, yeah, I'm shifting, I'm changing, because it wasn't natural to me. The way I was born, I don't know if I was born this way, if it was a result of my astrological sign, but my mother was very into astrology, so she had some 4 astrological charts of me drawn up before the age of 15, and you're the peacemaker, and so it could have been programmed into me, or it could have been part of my constitution, part of who I was. And so to figure out and to create that freedom, to break free from those laws that bind me to my personality. So, any comments, any questions?
I'll leave that to tomorrow is my birthday. Yeah. Kind of funny. Interesting anyway.
My mother was an Aries, and I could see, Aries always ramming, my sister's Piscean, and I didn't realize how much at war she is with herself. But she is. There's, just looking at these different things, things begin, sort of to make sense to a degree. But where we are proud, things, those qualities about ourselves that we really like. I used to love that I was, the peacemaker, that I brought people together. I used to love that I was very non-judgmental, and people can say anything to me. With my clients, I have to say I'm still very non-judgmental, because I can't, when they come and they pay me to help them work on themselves, I'm not going to suddenly flip into the Gurdjieffian mode and criticize them. But out in the world, with people, I've been known to be very obstinate and pig-headed, and some people say, how can you say that? And as I said, when I hear that, it's like, yes, I have made changes. I have moved myself away from where I was. Comments, questions?
I've been into astrology since a very early stage of my life too. And I have some friends, with a kind of tendency to to get the meaning of every sign. So, and have some books too, but you know, the propaganda that is around the newspapers and everything just is denying the possibility for the people to really know what Gurdjieff discovered, that what you discovered too, you know, since your mother was really being into astrology. I did be into astrology, but not not in the, I say, maybe deeper understanding of the searching around it, you know. But I like it very much. I like to be a liberal. I've been a liberal all my life, of course, and
well, I mean, the way normal astrology is, this is who you are, and these are all the influences, and these are the characteristics that make you who you are. And people want to know about themselves, but they do not want to struggle against themselves. And the only real struggle is within ourselves, against ourselves. And the only real friction is the friction within ourselves. You know, the story that I had about arguing with that supervisor. He first came in, and he came in so egocentric, so full of himself. And he just started pushing his weight around, and there had been people who had been there for years. And, you know, he was writing them up and putting notes in their file. And I was reading about this need to struggle, and at first it was so difficult. But I started to do it with this guy publicly, and it got to the point where he tried to go to our supervisor and get me fired. And but he was always looking for another job. He didn't want to be where he was, so he eventually got a job as what we call a special constable for the Ontario government. And then he got a job as a police officer. And I always knew that there was a problem with this person. And he's now in jail. He shot and killed an 18-year-old youth. And they charged him with 2 charges. One was second-degree murder, and the other was attempted murder. And he got off on the second-degree murder charge. But he shot this kid, and then he shot him again. And this kid was on a streetcar. He couldn't have gotten off. There were huge protests here in the city. And the second set of shots, he claimed that the person had lifted the knife up and was moving. And they determined that the first volley of shots, he severed the person's spine. And so the second set of shots was completely unnecessary. So that, you know, this is, I remember seeing his picture in the paper and going, oh my God, this is the person that I confronted and I challenged. And I knew that he was a pretty mean person and that he had this dark streak in him. But years later, you know, quite a few years later, when I realized it was him, it was just like, ooh, you know, I did choose my fight. This was a person who needed to be stopped. He was a bully. He did bully people. I wasn't imagining it. No one was imagining it. And so it was a weird story, the way it unfolded. And as I said, he's now in jail. Fortunately, up here in Canada, we do, police officers, you know, they're not, you know, get out of jail free card if they shoot someone. You know, a lot of investigation. There was huge protests. But I always had this fear that at some point I'd be driving in the middle of the night, and if I pulled over and he'd be there look at my license and go, I recognize you. But that'll never happen now. Where are you stuck, Ian? Do you know where you're stuck in your personality, your quality about yourself that you could work against?
I don't know. It's why I've been kind of quiet here. I mean, I'm a Virgo, and one of the things that I think I'm sort of proud of myself for, that I could fit in under a description of Virgo, is sort of prudish or disinterested in sex, or like, you know, no. I don't have sexual needs. I'm this pure little, you know, I don't know, something like that. And the ways to struggle with that are rather confronting. And I guess that's kind of the point. But also being in a relationship, I don't know. It's something I've been working through with some personal stuff for a long time now. So it's a little hard to talk about in this kind of a forum.
Yeah. I don't want us to get too personal.
Yeah. But it's something. I mean, on the one hand, you know, it's challenging and it's hard for me, but on the other hand, it's something that I feel like I've been trying to address for several years now. So even if there's no results, there's still some kind of a struggle happening. So that, I don't know.
There's the friction there. Yeah.
Yeah, there's some friction for sure. Just very slow and grindy.
Yeah. Have any of you either done the Myers-Briggs? I know that when I did it back in the 80s, I was an extreme introvert. And then I did it a couple of years ago. And actually the one online that I did a couple of years ago gave percentages. So, you know, you're 100% introvert to 100% extrovert, and where along the continuum you fall. And when I did it, I actually fell, you know, just not a huge part, but a little bit on the inside of the extroverted side. And I know that inwardly, I really am still an introvert. I love my private time. I love being alone. I love quiet time. But I no longer have the real problems that I had in terms of speaking with people. You know, I was a real extreme introvert up until my 30s. I went to Carleton University. I spent 3 years at Carleton University in Ottawa. And the only friend I made was my professor of Hinduism. That's how much of an introvert I was. And at some point, this was, you know, sometime in the last 7 or 8 years, I realized that my introversion, and I've come across this with a lot of clients who are also introverts, my introversion was actually a product of my ego. And it was sustained and maintained by my ego. Now, we are very mistaken when we think of the ego as this lunging, lusting part and me, and the ego is actually a very protective mechanism. Mr. Gurdjieff told C.S. Knott that, you know, for a normal person, for someone who is not on the path, the ego is indispensable. It's a protective mechanism. Within the Gurdjieff teachings, he goes on a lot about, you know, Monsieur self-love and Madame vanity, as if they are these horrible things. But to C.S. Knott, he described that for a normal person, they are sentinels. They are protective qualities. So our ego protects us from being abused and used by the world. So our ego doesn't necessarily manifest itself as in grasping and greedy as we normally think of the ego. There are very protective parts of the ego. And somewhere along the way, I developed extreme social anxiety. And part of that was, you know, my introversion, but I didn't want to embarrass myself in public. I remember once, I think I've talked about this, if not here, I've talked about it quite a few places. When my daughters came over when I was living with my brother, they said, "Dad, can we dye our hair?" Because their stepfather wouldn't let them dye their hair in his place because you can create a big mess with all the chemicals. And I went, yeah. And I ended up having this new shirt that got bleached on the it was a t-shirt, really nice one, bleached on the upper arm. And then I was on the subway once and I realized I was wearing the shirt and I felt mortified because I had this bleach on his shirt. And, you know, that was ridiculous. So I went out of my way to wear real crappy clothes. I remember once having to go and meet a lawyer, and I wore the jacket I wore and the shirt I wore and everything I wore, I deliberately wore just because it made me squirm inside. I wanted to, you know, rather than presenting such a good, noble, it created such a conflict within me because I didn't want to be embarrassed. My ego kept me restrained. I once let myself, I knew I wasn't going to hurt myself, but I just felt myself slipping, and I let myself slip down some stairs to the subway just to realize that the world wasn't going to come to an end. That so what? People would notice me and then they would go on their day, and so what? Or drop a cup of coffee accidentally in a coffee shop. So what? You can't quite see it here. I've got this green wall that I just showed you. It's actually a green color. I Home Depot, I Googled what the color is to create a green screen background so I can, you know, do recordings of myself and put a green screen in. And I ran out of paint and I needed just a little tin of it. And I went to Home Depot. I got the tin of the screen and I accidentally dropped it. This wasn't on purpose. I accidentally dropped it on the floor. It spilt over the whole floor and I didn't care. That's when I knew I had graduated from that. It didn't bother me. It was like, oh, sorry. Other, 10 years, 15 years before, I would have been mortified at having done that. It was like just they had to get the kitty litter out, and not only did I wait, I asked them to make me another one. 10 years ago, I would have just disappeared. I would go, oh my God, I would have turned beet red and left. And I just waited. I let them clean it up, put the kitty litter to soak it up. Then I cement floor at Home Depot. And then I said, can I get it again? And that was a real defining moment when that happened. It's like, yes, this struggle against my ego, against this fear of embarrassing myself in public, especially with strangers, was why I was so socially inhibited. And then, so I started laughing at my ego. And as I said, I started doing these things, these specific exercises, dressing down, weird things, like dropping coffee and whatever, just to over and over and over again to rub my ego in this and to realize that the world didn't come to an end. So figuring out these things within ourselves. And that moved me when I took the Myers-Briggs test a number of years ago. It says I'm on the extroversion side, but I know I'm not. I know that there's a part of me that loves solitude, that loves quietness, but I no longer feel the social apprehension that I did when I went, to groups of people. There were times in my past when I'd be invited to a party and I'd be outside the door holding a bottle of wine and I couldn't ring the doorbell, and then I would go all the way home. Now I know that people go to parties to meet people. They go to parties to meet strangers. And at a party, you have a right to go, hey, hi, my name's Alan, and interrupt a conversation and talk to someone and to do whatever. And before, it was like, I don't want to interrupt them. I don't want to, it was this fear. So I was, under more laws. I was under this real rigid sense of self that has now become more fluid. And it's not 24 laws. Mr. Gurdjieff says when we live in the mechanical realm, we're under 48 laws. And as we move up into the state of mindful awareness, we become under 24 laws. I think this of the personality, learning how to change, learning how to grow at that level to create that friction inside that melts the stuckness is not 24 laws, but it's some of them. Another thing, an analogy, a lever has a fulcrum. And, if we can move the fulcrum back to the center and get the full swing, I believe that the fulcrum, the bottom part, the fulcrum is a metaphor for our buffers. Our buffers get us stuck in a certain way. And through friction, through the struggle against ourselves, with ourselves, we are able to move that fulcrum back to the center to reduce the power of our buffers. And a buffer, as defined by Mr. Gurdjieff, is a mechanical contrivance, but it's not consciously created. It's unconsciously created to prevent our different eyes, the different parts of our personality, the multiplicity of eyes from bumping into each other and seeing each other. The thing is, even the most introverted person has had moments of extroversion, but they don't see that. They're fixated on the introversion. They don't realize that they already have the skills and they know how to talk to people. I used to consider myself the most introverted person in the world, but I have a lot of clients who come and they're suffering from social anxiety, and they now claim to be the most introverted person in the world. And I go, wow, that's interesting. So you can't talk to your mother? Oh, no, she's my mother, I can talk to her. Oh, so you can't talk to your best friend? Oh, no, I can talk to my best friends. They're only introverted in social situations, and they're only introverted when it comes to strangers. I could always talk, and I could always connect with people, and I could make those connections once I got to know them and once we became friends. It was the people that I wasn't friends with. When I mentioned parties, if I knew over half of the people in the party, I was okay. I could go into the party and I could have a good time. If I knew less than half the people, if I only knew the hosts, my anxiety levels would skyrocket. But I could talk to my mother, I could talk to my brother, I could talk to my family, I could talk to my friends. So in one respect, I knew how to talk, I knew how to communicate with people, but I had this extreme barrier in me when it came to strangers and people I didn't know and the world in general. So it wasn't that I had to learn new skills, it's that I had to free up myself so that I wasn't stuck in that one place all the time, and that I could go to a meetup group and talk to people, and I can go to different places and talk to people and quite enjoy myself now without experiencing that social anxiety that I used to experience. There's a lot of things going around on the internet where people talk about introversion as if it's a wonderful characteristic. But they're really broken, and it's really a result of social anxiety. Think of ourselves, our ancestors. You're born, your mother's suckling you in this tribe, and then she has to do something. She gives you to another woman who suckles you, who gives you to another woman who suckles you. And 150 people was about the maximum size a tribe got to. You would know everyone in the tribe. Where would the social anxiety be in our natural tribal setting that our ancestors lived in for 200,000 years of our history? It's only with the development of cities and larger populations and things like that, that introversion and extroversion has actually become a problem. And somehow people in early childhood, or perhaps they're born that way, they're stuck in the one position. Now, if you're an extrovert and you talk to people everywhere, you should perhaps try to spend a day alone. Extroverts hate spending time by themselves. They hate sitting quietly. They hate having to just be with themselves. So if you're an extrovert, try to live like an introvert for a while. Try to see if you can move that lever in the other way, the joy that an introvert takes in being alone, be by themselves. to develop that ability to just be okay when there's no one around. You don't have to text everyone. You don't have to message them. You don't have to phone them. You just sit quietly and get to know yourself. They say, through the Myers-Briggs personality test, they determine that it's almost like Mendelian genetics, that 75% of the population are extroverts and 25% are introverts. So if you're an extrovert, try to be an introvert. If you're an introvert, try to be an extrovert. If you're a Libran and you're into balance and harmony and peace, try to create a bit of friction with people. As you know, Frtiz Peters quoted, if you're an Aries and you like ramming things, figure out what it is you like ramming and then try to do the opposite. The only struggle is within ourselves. The only friction is our internal friction. One of the aphorisms on the study house wall, I'm going to get it wrong, but Mr. Gurdjieff said something like, you came here to work on yourself, and so thank everyone who gave you that opportunity. That is, what he means is, everyone who rubs you the wrong way, who upsets you and whatever, has given you the opportunity to work against yourself, to see something within yourself. Mr. Gurdjieff, when he created the pre-array, didn't create this idealized, harmonized environment where we are all love and we're all brothers and sisters and we're all one. He created friction deliberately. There was a Russian, I believe his name is Reconciling, who was a lawyer in Russia, but he had to leave Russia. And he actually was able to set up a business importing and exporting things. But Mr. Gurdjieff got him to the pre-array, and Frtiz Peters and the other boys hated him. And they engineered this real mean prank, and this man left. And Mr. Gurdjieff went to Frtiz Peters, who I think was 12 or 13 at the time, and told Frtiz Peters he had to go and find him and bring him back. And then Mr. Gurdjieff revealed that this person rubbed everyone the wrong way, everyone. No one liked him. And as a result, Mr. Gurdjieff paid him to be at the pre-array. He hired him just to be himself, because he provided a mirror to other people. It's not that he was disagreeable. He is who he is. It's why am I reacting this way? What is it revealing about how my own levers have gotten stuck within me? What do I have to do in order to free myself up so that he no longer bothers me, so he no longer affects me? The difference between mechanical man and mindful man is mechanical man is very reactive. Someone pushes our button and react. When you step up to the next level, you kind of erase those buttons and you act in the world. Internal considering is reacting to the weather, to the smiles, to how people treat us. Externally considering is acting. It's stepping up to that next level so that someone could call us a fool, they could yell at us, they could say whatever, and inwardly we are not affected by what they say because we act, we don't react. And we're these mechanical reactive beings. We're walking around all the time and different situations are getting us to react in certain ways. And we've got to figure out within ourselves, particularly the major programs. And I think here, this is where astrology can be useful. Mr. Gurdjieff called it an ancient science. It goes back at least to the Assyrians, probably older. This is complex understanding of human psychology that has been watered down and turned into this frivolous, who am I kind of thing, rather than what are the tendencies within myself against which I need to struggle. So think about that. Where are your struggle points? What is it that you need to fight against?
Yeah.
Something you said about internal versus external considering. I notice I have a very strong automatic reaction when something gets in my way. So say I'm driving and all of a sudden the person in front of me is going really slowly and I can't figure out why. If I can figure out why, oh, there's somebody crossing ahead, or, oh, then I'm fine. But if I can't figure it out, I get really upset. I also notice I have a tendency one of the places it's most obvious is if I'm in the shower, I'm washing my hair or my face or something, and I accidentally bump into the tube. It's one of those removable shower heads. So it's got one of those plastic tubes. If I bump into that, I get really startled. And I don't know, it occurs to me that in both cases, it's a question of something external to me sort of coming into my world in a way that I wasn't expecting. And it sort of, my guess is there's a very rigid structure in me that, when something bumps it that I'm not aware of or that I can't figure out, it just sends me off.
Yeah. Does the driving example inflame any degree of your sense of self-importance, your self-love? How can he do this? I've got to get here. Is the taste of your ego involved in that? And, I had a girlfriend who became my fiance, became my wife, who's now my ex-wife. The first time she was in a car with me driving, she couldn't believe it. I was Mr. Hyde. And I used to have this, personality that manifested, and it took me a lot to work against that, but it was my ego. So when you can explain why they're driving like that, it's okay. But when you think you can't explain it, you can't understand it, do you feel hurt, put out, upset, like it's an affront to you?
Sort of. It's the feeling is, how can you be so dumb and inconsiderate of other people?
Yeah.
Which can include me, but not necessarily. I'll be just as bothered if I see somebody like walking across the road really slowly and somebody's trying to turn right.
Yeah. That
person crossing the road's blocking all the traffic. I'm going straight through, so it's not inconveniencing me, but they're being kind of dumb.
Yeah.
At least that's the story I'm telling myself. And I think that's where the irritation comes from.
Yeah. Look for the taste of your ego. That me, the subjectivizing. The ego is not what what's generally portrayed in the West. It's much more subtle, much more refined, but it comes back to me. There's some kind of a sense of, even though it may not be affecting you, you've got these roles and everything. You've been in that position where you've been the one trying to turn left or whatever, and it has affected you. And it's bringing up some kind of an echo, my guess, bringing up some kind of an echo. So in one way, you're actually doing something that's good because you're able to empathize with the other drivers. So you're able to step into their shoes. But you're doing it in a way that's inflaming your ego. Perhaps that person, I've got bone spurs on my knees. And so the ligaments and the tendons that go over my knees, if I move too fast, I'll be hobbling for a day or two. I can't, every time I run for the bus, it's like, damn, I did it again. So I can walk for miles, but I can't spurt, and I don't want to move quickly. So I don't hold it against people who don't move too quickly, when they're crossing, the walking along the crosswalk and there are people in cars and whatever. That's because I can inwardly empathize and say, well, maybe they've got maybe they've got a sore ankle, maybe they've got arthritis, maybe they've got, and this is actually how I started doing it years ago. When I was in my first group led by Professor Christopher Holmes at York University, I remember being in one of the cafeterias at university, and the lady behind there just treated me miserably. And I was just, how dare she? And then I started thinking, well, maybe she was up all night, maybe her kid was sick and vomiting, and maybe, and I started pretending and imagining all these reasons, and suddenly I no longer felt inflamed, I no longer felt upset at her. And I began to then do this and generalize it. Maybe that person driving, maybe he wasn't paying attention. Maybe he was changing the radio dial or doing something he shouldn't have been doing. And he just sort of took his foot off the gas because he didn't want to get into an accident, or, and if he was going really fast, maybe I would be slamming into the back of him, or things like that. I began to make excuses for other people. This is years ago, back in 1981. That dinner lady, or the lunch lady, I remember her. And she was actually, probably 10 years older than me. And I could imagine what it's like to be there working for minimum wage with all these snotty kids at university who think they're really important. And, so I began to consider her, and by that, I began to imagine all these reasons why she was behaving that way. And a lot of acceptance came from that. And, I generalized it to driving and all sorts of things. At any rate, it's noon now, so we're out of time, and I'll try and contact both of you this week. Let's see if we can talk. So thank you. Take care, and be well.
Okay, guys. Thanks, Alan.
Have a nice day.